who are you really? I mean, for centuries, we've kind of been told to think of ourselves as a mind, right? A consciousness that just happens to be living inside a body. But what if that's completely backwards? What if the key to understanding who you are isn't in your head at all, but in your skin, your muscles, your bones? That's the idea we're going to explore today, that our deepest self is actually written in our physical form, and we're going to look at it through a whole new lens. Okay, so take a look at this. What are you actually seeing here? A shoulder? Maybe an arm? Just a curve of skin catching the light? It's beautiful, for sure. It's abstract, and it's definitely part of a person. But try to look a little closer. Just for a second, forget what you know. Because what if this isn't just a body part? What if it's a terrain, a rolling hill, a quiet valley, a landscape with its own unique geography? This one little question, well, it changes everything. And it's what we're going to dive into. Now, to really appreciate this new idea, we first have to understand the old one, an idea that has pretty much dominated Western thought for hundreds of years. The idea that you are not your body. Seriously, think about it. When you say my body, it almost sounds like it's something you own, right? Like it's separate from the I that's doing the owning. Well, that feeling, it has some really deep philosophical roots. For ages, this has been the central debate. On one side, you've got dualism. The mind is one thing, the body is a totally different thing. On the other side is monism. Nope, they're a single, inseparable unit. But for centuries, one of these ideas, dualism, completely took over our culture. And the guy we can largely thank for that is the 17th century philosopher René Descartes. He was the one who argued that the mind was the source of all real knowledge, and the body, well, the body and its senses were unreliable, often deceptive. The body was just a machine, a vessel. The real you was the thinker hiding inside. Decades later, the philosopher Gilbert Ryle came up with the absolute perfect cutting phrase for this idea. He called it the ghost in the machine. And it just perfectly captures that image of some phantom pilot steering a flesh and blood vehicle, doesn't it? It's a powerful image, but as we're learning, it's also a deeply flawed one. So what if that whole idea is just wrong? Over the last century or so, this huge paradigm shift has been brewing in philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience, one that gets rid of the ghost and puts the body right back in the driver's seat. This new idea is called embodied cognition, and honestly, it's a total game changer. It basically says that thinking isn't just some abstract thing happening in your brain. It's grounded in your physical experiences. You don't just have a body, you are your body, and you think with it. And that changes how we understand pretty much everything, from emotions to memory. This idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was built up over time. You had early thinkers like Freud showing how our identity is first tied to bodily sensations. Then you had developmental psychologists like Piaget, who watched how babies literally think by touching and tasting the world around them. And this all culminated in philosophers like Merleau-Ponty, who argued that our lived body isn't just a container, it's the main place where we understand anything at all. And today, neuroscience is providing the hard evidence. We now know our brain is constantly building our sense of self by mixing together signals from our eyes, our skin, and our internal body awareness. There are these fascinating experiments, like the rubber hand illusion, where scientists can actually trick your brain into feeling a fake hand as your own. It's wild, and it proves our sense of self isn't some fixed thing. It's being actively built, moment by moment, from all this bodily data. Okay, so if philosophy and science are both pointing to this embodied self, where can we actually see it? This is where art, and specifically photography, gives us the visual proof we've been looking for. So, let's look at this again. Now, it's not just a back, is it? It really is a geography. You can see the gentle slope, the texture of the surface, the way light and shadow carve out those hills and valleys. The metaphor starts to feel real. And look at this. This is where that line between us and the natural world just starts to dissolve. On the left, you've got human skin. On the right, weathered wood. The textures, the patterns, they're speaking the exact same visual language. It shows you just how thin that boundary really is. And this is so much more than just a stylistic choice. By removing the face, the context, any real markers of who this person is, the photographer forces us into this raw, sensory encounter with the body itself. It becomes a visual argument. Before we tell ourselves stories about who we are, there is this fundamental physical presence. This is where the self begins. So how do they do it?
how do photographers manage to turn a person into a landscape? Well, it comes down to a few very specific and very powerful techniques.
First, they get in close, so close that a familiar body part becomes an abstract shape. They use black and white to get rid of the distraction of color, which really makes us focus on texture and form. They use dramatic lighting, not to make someone look good, but to literally sculpt the body. And they crop everything strategically, cutting away anything that screams portrait.
I mean, just take light, for example. Look at how it rakes across the skin here. That's exactly the kind of light you'd see at sunrise hitting the side of a mountain. It carves out shape and creates this incredible sense of volume and depth. The light actually creates the landscape. And this is not a new idea. Photographers have been exploring this for decades. You have pioneers like Edward Weston who turned the body into these universal, almost abstract sculptures. Others, like Imogen Cunningham, found the same elegant curves in a human back as in the petal of a flower. Each artist, in their own way, used the body not as a subject for a portrait, but as a terrain to be explored.
Ultimately, the goal here isn't just to make a pretty picture. It's to make a much deeper philosophical statement. It's to reveal the body as the fundamental ground zero of our existence, the original landscape from which our sense of self emerges. All right, let's pull all these threads together. We've gone on a journey from a ghost in the machine to a self that is fundamentally, inescapably, and I think beautifully embodied.
And this brings us to the final, really challenging question. If our thinking, our feeling, our very identity is woven from our physical existence, then who could you possibly be without it? The question itself almost starts to feel impossible to even answer. What these images and this entire way of thinking really suggest is that you don't need a ghost. You don't need a separate pilot. The mind isn't in the body. The mind is a function of the body. It just rises directly out of matter, a seamless, integrated whole. In the end, that's the real power of this perspective. The camera isn't just taking a picture of flesh and bone. It's holding up a mirror to a new idea of who we are. Not a mind trapped in a machine, but a living, breathing landscape, present and completely whole.